Chapter 1. The heir to the Beijing Circle, HES wild and lustful. On the double bed, Song Xianya was enveloped by the man's tall, sturdy frame. Her pale, delicate legs were firmly grasped in the man's hot, palm-like hands. Their heartbeats resonated in unison, their breaths intertwined. Her soft body trembled under his touch. "I'm going to kiss you." The man leaned down toward Song Xianya. As he spoke, his warm breath stirred the strands of hair near her ear, and his fiery exhale brushed against her nose. Their tender lips met, sending shivers through her heart. Song Xianya's eyelashes quivered violently, and she closed her eyes tightly. Her soft, white arms wrapped around the man's neck. The floor was a chaotic mess. A black suit jacket lay atop pink lace lingerie, a torn dress, high-heeled shoes scattered near the floor-to-ceiling window, and a white shirt stained with red lipstick marks all worse runabout. "Is this your first time? Can you?" He noticed Song Xianya's tension and paused abruptly. His deep husky voice, laced with desire, gently soothed her. "If it's uncomfortable, just tell me." His breath caressed her elobe, sending waves of warmth and tingling sensation through her skin. In the throes of passion, Song Xianya opened her mouth and bit lightly into the man's Adam's apple. Her rosy lips murmured words, "Use a condom." His large hand, veins bulging with excitement, reached for the bedside table and pulled out a box. "Okay," he said, his voice both tender and intense. The air was thick with the unique scent of mingled sweat and hormones. They spent the entire night entwined in each other's arms. When Song Xianya woke up again, it was already 8 o'clock the next evening. She was utterly exhausted. She had lost count of how many times the man had taken her. She had experienced firsthand what it meant to be dead and then reborn, reborn and then dead once more. Her waist ached terribly. Her head felt swollen, as if she had been drunk on life itself, unable to tell whether it was day or night. As she lifted the blanket and prepared to get out of bed, she suddenly felt a heaviness around her waist. She looked down and saw that a man's arm was draped across her waist. His muscles were taut and defined, his skin cool and pale as jade. Vivid images from last night flooded her mind. Scene after scene, moment after moment, all blazingly passionate and indescribable. Her heart softened, and her cheeks burned with heat. Last night, Song Xianya had been thoroughly intoxicated by her half-sister, Zhang Ying, who dragged her into a room. There, she had met another man who was equally drunk, all night long. The curtains were drawn, and the lights remained off as if her eyes had been covered. She hadn't seen what the man actually looked like. At the same time, the darkness had heightened her senses to an almost unbearable degree. Her touch, taste, and smell became incredibly acute. Had given her a truly wonderful first experience. The man was incredibly gentlemanly. He hadn't taken advantage of her at all, paying constant attention to her comfort throughout. Even after Had reached his own satisfaction, he hadn't simply fallen asleep instead. Had held her close and tenderly for a long time. He wiped away her sweat and used a damp towel to clean every inch of her body. He truly embodied the virtues of a good lover. This made Song Xianya feel respected, and his gentle care had completely offset her anxiety and self-doubt. Honestly, having encountered such a compatible man on her very first time, Song Xianya couldn't help but wonder what he looked like. She turned her head to glance at him, but froze mid-motion. At 1.7 meters tall and weighing 90 kilograms, she was the target of ridicule from the socialite clique led by her half-sister, Zhang Ying. They mocked her for being overweight, giving her the travelers like piggy hero. Once the lights went out, everyone seemed the same, but when the lights came on, the differences became glaring. She worried that when the man woke up and saw her, Had curse her for being a toad who'd eaten a swan's flesh. It had been an accident to begin with. Well on it, Song Xianya decided to pull up her skirt and leave. She gently lifted the man's arm, which had been resting across her waist, and set it aside. The moment her feet touched the ground, Her legs felt as weak as noodles, and she nearly stumbled. Song Xianya sat on the edge of the bed for a while, letting her legs regain some strength before finally standing up. Chapter 2: A hasty escape and a narrow encounter. The room was eerily silent, save for the faint hum of the central air conditioning. Song Xianya leaned against the bed frame, her movements as unsteady as those of a newborn learning to walk, carefully picking up the clothes scattered across the floor. The torn dress was clearly beyond repair. Its hem had been ripped open wide, as if silently mocking last night's wild escapades. All she could do was slip on the white shirt covered in red lipstick prints. The shirt was oversized, carrying a faint scent of tobacco and a crisp, cool aroma of fire smell that belonged to that man. She fastened the topmost button, yet it still cowled and hid her voluptuous thighs. She bit her lip, enduring the ache in her body, grabbed her bag and the sky-high heel scent. Like a thief barefoot, she made her way to the door. The moment her hand touched the doorknob, she glanced back at the large bed. The man remained in a side-lying position, the blanket having slipped halfway down, revealing his strong, built back and smooth, flowing muscle contours. Although his face was obscured, that naturally commanding aura of dominance was so palpable. Even in sleep, that one couldn't help but feel awed and hesitant to act rashly. "Goodbye, stranger," Song Xianya murmured silently to herself, then gently turned the doorknob and slipped out. The hallway was carpeted with thick, plush rugs that muffled every footstep. This was a top minus of minus, the minus-line presidential suite. The living room outside was extravagantly opulent place that ordinary people could never afford. Song Xianya felt a flicker of unease in her heart last night. She had been tricked by that bitch Zhang Yingying, but this man clearly was one to be trifled with either. If he found out she had just run off like this, would he? Not daring to think too much, she quickened her pace and left the room almost as if fleeing, dashed into the elevator, and pressed the button for the lobby on the first floor. It wasn't until she stood in the hotel's brilliantly lit lobby, where the air was thick with a mingling scent of perfume and coffee, that Song Xianya finally felt truly alive. She found a sofa in a quiet corner, sat down, quickly put on her high heels, and tidied up her disheveled hair. In the mirror, she saw herself. Her lips were swollen and red, her gaze hazy, and her neck bore several ambiguous red marks. Hurriedly, she pulled up the collar of her shirt and rummaged through her bag for concealer, slapping it on haphazardly. "Song Xianya, you're such a disgrace," she muttered to herself in the mirror, laughing bitterly at herself. Just as she was about to leave, the sounds of laughter coming from the lobby lounge made her blood freeze instantly. "Ying, do you think that fat pig is probably being tormented to death by that homeless guy right now?" "Last night, I was even afraid she'd end up dying from the dose of medicine I gave her." That talks so disgustingly. Who asked her to overreach herself and not even bother to take a good look at herself? She's looking like a pig, and yet she dares to compete with me for Brother Gus' attention. This time, I'm going to bring her down completely and show her once and for all how she'll ever manage to survive in the circle. The speaker was none other than her stepsister, Zhang Yingying, surrounded by several wealthy young ladies, who usually trailed behind her, basking in her reflected glory. Sitting right in the center, a man with a gentle, jade-like demeanor yet an aloof, indifferent gaze. This was precisely the brother Gu that Zhang Yingying had been talking about. Gu Yanqing. Song Xianya instinctively shrank back, hiding behind the massive Roman column. If they were to see her now looking disheveled and with a flushed face, it would mean Zhang Yingying's plot had succeeded. "Hey, Yingying, look at that man over there. He's so handsome," one of the socialites suddenly exclaimed in a hushed voice. Though her excitement was hard to hide, Song Xianya followed their gazes and saw a tall figure walking in through the hotel's revolving door. The man wore a perfectly tailored, handcrafted black suit. His posture was as straight and upright as a pine tree, his features deep in three-dimensional sharp eyebrows, piercing eyes, a high-bridged nose, and thin lips pressed tightly together. That face was simply God's most perfect masterpiece gold. Ascetic, yet exuding an overwhelming presence that made one's knees weak. What's most fatal is that just below the outer corner of his left eye, there's an extremely faint beauty mark, adding a touch of bewitching allure. Song Xianhui's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Although it was pitch-black last night, in the heat of passion, her fingertips had traced the man's eyebrows and eyes countless times. The exact spot of that beauty mark, the curve of his jawline. It's him, the man who'd been lingering around her all last night. Could he really look like this? He strode into the lobby with long, confident strides, exuding an aura that seemed to render the surrounding hubbub completely irrelevant. The hotel manager followed closely behind, bowing and scraping with a sycophantic expression on his face. Oh my gosh, isn't that the prince from the Qin family? I heard he just came back from abroad and has been keeping a low profile ever since. Who would have thought he'd be even more handsome in person than in those magazines? The socialites were so excited their faces turned red, and they all hurriedly pulled out their phones to take secret photos. Zhang Yingying's eyes widened, and the vicious expression she had just worn instantly softened, giving way to a shy, demure look. That's Qin Yueqi, the young master Qin. I never would have guessed he'd be staying at this hotel too. It'd be great if I could get to know him. Song Xianya hid behind a pillar, her palms soaked with cold sweat. Hes awake? Has he noticed Jess run away? He didn't linger in the lounge. His gaze swept coldly across the lobby, as if he were searching for something. When his eyes fell upon the pillar where Song Xianya was hiding, Song Xianya felt as though her breath might stop altogether. However, his gaze didn't linger, it instead headed straight for the stage. Check the surveillance footage of the presidential suite from last night, especially the people who left. Qin Yueqi's voice, deep and magnetic, carried clearly across the empty lobby. Song Xianhui's heart gave a sudden jolt. Hes looking for her. It's all over, really. It's all over now. Song Xianhui in his mind went completely blank. If he caught her, what would happen? Would he kill her to silence her? Or would he force her to take responsibility? Hey, who's hiding behind that pillar over there? Are you being awfully sneaky? A sharp voice suddenly rang out. One of Zhang Yingying's attendants, with keen eyes, spotted the hem of Song Xianhui in his skirt. All eyes instantly turned toward him. Song Xianya had no choice but to steel herself and step out into the open. Song Xianya? Zhang Yingying. As eyes widened in surprise when she recognized her, then burst into a wildly exaggerated laugh. I'm not mistaken, am I? Isn't this our piggy hero? How come you're dressed like that? That shirt, it doesn't seem to be yours, does it? Zhang Yingying's gaze fell upon the oversized white shirt that Song Xianya was wearing, a typically masculine minus style shirt, and judging by its texture, it was quite expensive. Gu Yanxing frowned, a hint of disgust flashing in his eyes. Song Xianya, what are you doing here? Is this really a place you'd even think of coming to? Song Xianya took a deep breath and forced herself to calm down. She couldn't panic, absolutely couldn't panic. Can't I just come here to eat? Song Xianya tilted her head up, trying her best to sound confident. The clothes are my boyfriend's. So what? Is that illegal? Boyfriend? Zhang Yingying sounded as if she'd just heard the biggest joke in the world. You? Which blind man would ever look at you? Could it be that homeless guy from last night? The surrounding laughter rose and fell in waves. Just then, a commotion broke out from the front desk. He held a room key card and turned around. His eyes, as dark as ink, swept over the crowd and landed precisely on Song Xianya. At that moment, time seemed to stand still. Song Xianya met his gaze, and her legs went weak. She almost lost her balance. His eyes were profoundly deep, tinged with a hint of inquiry, a touch of amusement, and a lingering spark of hidden passion that hadn't yet faded. He took a long stride and walked toward her. Step by step, the crowd automatically parted to make a path. Zhang Yingying and the others excitedly covered their mouths, thinking that the crown prince was about to come over and give this impudent, overconfident fat man a lesson. Qin Yu he walked up to Song Xianyan and stopped in front of her. He was very tall, and although Song Xianyan was wearing high heels, she only reached his chest. He looked down at her from above, his gaze lingering for 2 seconds on her swollen lips and the ambiguous red mark at the neckline of her blouse. Running for what? 3 characters, spoken in a low voice yet carrying an unquestionable aura of authority. The entire venue fell silent. Zhang Yingying's smile froze on her face, and Gu Yanjing's brow furrowed even deeper. Song Xianya swallowed hard, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't run away, I just left first. Hinui suddenly reached out, his slender fingers gently hooking the neckline of her shirt and straightening her slightly crooked collar, a gesture so tender it was almost startling. You're wearing your clothes backward, he said casually, his tone laced with a touch of indulgent exasperation. Also, you left without paying last night. Does that count as skipping out on the bill? Fifth. The sound of gasps filled the air around us. Cheating on the bill? What kind of ferocious and ruthless words are these? Song Xiany's face turned instantly as red as a ripe tomato. She stared wide-eyed at Qin Yu. This man looked perfectly decent, yet how could he speak in such a shameless way? Ginso. You know her? Zhang Yingying asked in a trembling voice, staring at Song Xianya in disbelief. Only then did Qin Yu turn his head slightly and cast a cold glance at Zhang Yingying. His gaze was as icy as frozen steel, as if he were looking at a pile of garbage. This is my girlfriend, Qin Yu, he said, withdrawing his gaze and looking back at Song Xianya, with a sly smirk on his lips. What's the matter? Do you have something against her? Having finished speaking, he ignored Song Xianya's stiffness and reached out with his long arm, pulling this little chubby pig right into his embrace. In full view of everyone, he lowered his head and whispered softly into her ear, as if asserting his ownership. Now that you're awake, shouldn't we settle the score, me Song? Song Xianya felt like crying but had no tears left to shed. Now things have really gone south. Not only did she fail to escape, but everyone in the entire Beijing metropolitan area now knows about it. This toad is truly gobbled up as swan's flesh, and not just any swan, but the biggest, wildest one of all.